Welcome to the podcast. We're so glad you joined us today. And I don't know if it's going to come through as much, but we love what we do. Do you love what you do? Some days there are moments when I think about, I love being a dad. Like I just got a message, I didn't tell you, from one of our children who's out and about. And I'm like, I was just kind of worried about him a little bit. Mm-hmm. And without me saying anything, they responded. And I'm like, there was just our adult children, and there was a level of vulnerability that they had and sharing and connecting and just, I don't know. I just like, I love this.
All the work is worth it. Is that what you're trying to say?
Yeah, I just love it. It's just like there are few things in this life that will bring you greater earthly happiness, right?
Yeah.
Joy in this life than having real relationships with your children. And
I thought you were going to say real relationships with people that you have helped co-create with the Lord.
Yeah. All right, that too. I'll go with that. Anyway, I don't know why that it just struck me as we're starting off a new year, thinking, okay, what's in store for this year?
Yeah.
What do we want for our kids? And
well, I think that this is a great episode about a new perspective on family life. Talking with Tim and Maggie Glemkowski, I feel like I gained a fresh perspective even on the way that they see family life and working together as a family and a team and missionaries and suffering with your children when your children suffer, how to teach them and form them. It's just such a beautiful example of a young family who's really responding to what God has called them to.
Yeah.
And I think you guys are going to love this podcast. I think it's just going to be, it's just like another like ordinary family doing extraordinary things.
Yeah. Truly gifted in many ways.
Yeah.
All right, but before we jump into that, we mentioned this last time, but we are going to England. We're going to the UK, and we would love to have you join us. Or if you know friends in the UK that to share this info, where are we going to be?
Throughout like the past probably like 3 or 4 years since COVID, we occasionally have listeners from England say, "Oh, we'd love to have you come over. Love to have you come over." But then they all kind of came at once. And so we were able to gather a whole bunch of events together, starting in London.
Okay.
We'll be at the London Oratory. We'll be going to an Opus Dei school down there in London. We're working with the Catholic Mothers Apostolate. We're going to be doing a dinner there. And there's actually even more events than that we're doing in London.
Right.
Then we're going to go go south.
We're going south
to West Sussex. And so we'll be at Worth Abbey. We'll do some events down there, talks and workshops. And then we go north. Last thing we do is go north. Well, second to the last thing. So we're going north, and we'll be in the Diocese of Hallam and the Diocese of Nottingham and Sheffield and in Lincoln. And those events are sponsored by those dioceses. And then we have a little bit of in-between time when we're going to
do our own little
Scotland and
stuff.
do our own little thing. And then for the weekend, go back to London for another event. But anyway, if you are in continental Europe, if you are in Ireland, and of course England, we would love to see you. So all of these events can be found at messyfamilyproject.org/UK-tour. And we'll put the link, of course, in our show notes here. You can go there. There is details. There are information. There's people in England who are doing all the a lot of these people are just moms or moms. Yeah. Who have a bunch of little kids who just want to see this happen. We are so grateful. And there's registration links, all of that. So anyway, there you go.
We'd love to see you. Please make sure to come up and see us if we're out, whether it be wherever we might be. And again, we have that event right before in New Jersey. We talked about last week as well. Really going to be a beautiful day.
And hey, if some of you like who are in continental Europe are thinking, oh, hey, maybe we'll make a weekend of it, going to England, stay over, maybe someone, we're within driving distance of probably almost everybody in England with all of the events we're doing. But hey, maybe you want to do a weekend away and come to our, do an overnight and come to one of our events while we're there.
Again, we mentioned this last time, so I'll be brief. We are going to be coming up to a celebration of our 10th anniversary. You'll see a 10th anniversary of the podcast. And we've gotten a number of emails already from people who have been listening since 2015, 2016, 2017. If you started listening back then, please contact us. We were collecting a list, and we have some questions for you, and I think we have some fun stuff that we might do.
Yeah.
But if you could email us newsletter@Messy Family Project, we'd love to connect with you. If you've been listening for that long, 8-10 years. All right?
Don't forget too that Lent is really like right around the corner. So if you are in a parish and you're interested in promoting our Lenten program, Cana 90, go and check out our webpage, messyfamilyproject.org/Cana 90, CANA, then the number 90. And if you go there to sign up, it'll ask, are you a parish leader? And you can click on that to get more information, because I know the parishes are making decisions about how to celebrate Lent right now. And we want to get out there, and make our free resources available.
All right, let's jump into today's topic.
Yes.
We have we kind of teased this up a little bit, but I love this conversation. You're really going to enjoy it. Tim Glemkowski, he was kind of headed up the National Eucharistic Congress. That was amazing. Largest event in the U.S., at least probably Catholic U.S. in ages, if not forever. And Tim was leading that, and now he's continuing leading, but in a new role. He's leading the Amazing Parish, which is helping renew parishes. His wife, Maggie is on the board for the SALT Family Missions, right? Mission Experience. And if you're not familiar with SALT, that's the Society of Our Lady of the Most Holy Trinity. Sister Miriam, you've probably heard her talks and stuff like that, right?
Yes, so
pretty amazing. Yeah. But they're going to be talking about families being on mission, right?
Yeah. Yes. And they're going to they'll introduce their family to you and tell some stories about their marriage and their family. But anyway, all right, let's go ahead and jump in. So we are so excited to welcome Tim and Maggie Glemkowski to our program. Welcome, Tim and Maggie.
Thank you so much. So great to be here with you.
Oh, thanks. Thank you for joining us. And I feel like this is going to be, it's a little bit different. It's like a different aspect of family life that I don't think we probably talk about as much, but one that is, I think, can be a great blessing to families, no matter what age they're at, because we're all called to be on mission. We're all called to evangelize.
Yeah, and I feel like we as a ministry, we often talk about the importance of how we confer identity, belonging, and then we're supposed to be sending our kids on mission, but we as a family are called to be on mission, right? And both of you have been serving both in the home and outside the home in the church for many years. Tim, we've crossed paths as you just led the National Eucharistic Congress. You're now leading the Amazing Parish. You have and ministry in other areas as well. And so why don't we just start with just kind of getting to know you guys as a family. Were you always just perfectly suited for each other? Did you just magically just fall in love?
That's a very, very good question, Mike.
Yeah, so we both went to Steubenville, Franciscan University, and met there, and we started dating our senior year, and fell in love pretty quickly, for sure. And I think in an unexpected way for both of us, for sure. But then we actually did. We were married in 2014, but prior to that, we did have a brief stint of 18 months or so of being apart in the midst of it. So for sure, I think part
by
of that
choice or how did that?
Yeah, I think when you're young, in your young 20s and things are messy. I mean, it's relevant even to the kind of the topic today, because I think for both of us, we really wrestled with. We'd received a lot of great formation and developed a real heart for proclaiming the gospel. And I think we both really wrestled candidly with how that fit in family life. And so for us, it did lead us to break up for a period of time.
And to even backtrack further, we debated about whether or not to even start dating, because I'd actually already committed to a year of mission work after graduation. So it kind of, the topic was very prominent from like the get-go of, what does this look like if I'm feeling called this way, but I also really like this guy? And we dated through that senior year and past graduation. But it was during that year while I was serving in Zambia that we ended up breaking up. And Tim actually
you were serving in Zambia? I just want to make sure I heard that right. Okay.
Yeah.
And you're Canadian, right? So wait a second.
That's the Canadian folks. I'm technically a dual citizen.
Yes.
But if you hear a little oat in a boat, that's where that comes from. But so I was in Zambia with the Salesians and I was really excited, having felt a real call from actually a very young age to serve in that particular way. And it was a little bit of a wrench in the plans when Tim entered the scene, because I was like, wait, this isn't...
It took me 6 months to convince Maggie to date me.
Yes.
So
it took me a little bit more than a year. You know?
Yeah.
I got you. Just by...
So we, about halfway through that mission year, we broke up, just being in obviously like very different experiences of life. And, one patchy Skype call a week wasn't really working so great for the communication aspect. But following that, Tim actually went to seminary for a year.
Yeah, kind of whatever I do, I think I go all in on it.
Yeah.
And so I'd been discerning a lot through college. And then I think,
I threw a wrench in the plans.
Just kind of, really fell in love with Maggie.
Yeah.
And so when we broke up, it was like, all right, I'm probably like, that was probably the one. And if she wasn't, then I'm probably supposed to be a priest or,
wow,
actually,
that's beautiful
really
in some ways.
It's kind of practical. And so I went to seminary for a year. Maggie got back from mission, went to nursing school for a year. And we really didn't talk for like 18 months. We were in a wedding together that fall.
She
was a bridesmaid.
The Foley's, Elliot and Jess Foley.
Oh,
yeah,
nice.
We're closest friends. So we were in the wedding. Brutal. Just
goodness.
brutal. So that was, but we made it. We made it through.
But outside of that, didn't see each other for a year.
We didn't have any contact. Yeah.
For longer, 18 months.
I'm sure that wedding, being in the wedding, how was that not super intense for you guys? Was it crazy?
It was. The first time Tim sat down to hey, we just need to catch up at some point. He sat down and I got so nervous. I went and I threw up. And I was when I came back and we had a conversation.
Hey, that's a sign of true love.
And exactly. Yeah. It was. So yes, it was intense to say the least.
Wow.
But we survived. The rest of the wedding party survived that awkward dynamic that they were trying to dance around,
Yeah, who's it more uncomfortable for?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And that's a great, in a lot of ways. I mean, Maggie went to this very secular nursing program, upstate New York, Binghamton University there. And really I think even that was part of your sort of
yeah, very much like a mission year again.
To those people, it's one of the most, post-Christian parts of the United States. And
Sure.
Seminary was an incredible year of formation and growth and getting closer to the Lord. And, sort of felt called out independently of really any dynamics that we were involved in.
Yeah, because we weren't. We just weren't talking at all.
I was still very much so in love with Maggie. And so, I was like, well, I gotta call her one last time. So I left seminary. We're moving on with life. And it was my gotta go see about a girl moment from Good Will Hunting or something. I just basically called her and told her I was still in love with her and asked her where she was moving. And she said, well, Ann Arbor, Michigan. I said, great, I'm moving to Ann Arbor, Michigan.
And he nice. You know what? I just love stories like this. They're so good to hear. And what it makes me think of? It makes me wonder, when you say about you were on track to be a missionary and then you kind of threw a wrench in each other's plans,
Mm-hmm.
But that was God acting in your lives, right? And it's not if this wouldn't have happened, then God could have had, another priest, or God could have had another missionary. It's no, God was doing these things. He was stirring up things in your hearts at that moment for a reason. And I wonder, when you look back on that time that you had where you're discerning and you're apart and you're a missionary, and there must have been something that was begun in your hearts that God used during that time apart. Do you know what I'm saying? Do you think, how would that have been different? Would you have grown as much? Say you'd never met each other, you hadn't fallen in love, when you were at Franciscan, then maybe there would have been some growth that you would have missed out on, rather than the way it was. God has a perfect plan for you. I don't know if you've ever thought about that.
It's been a big topic of even processing lately, coming off of a big project, the Eucharistic Congress, that really took our whole family, on a wild ride. And we've been looking back kind of over our story and piecing things together. And I think a couple things were at play. I do think for each of us, there was a very limited definition of what mission looked like. For me, it was, if you want to be holy, you want to be a saint, you want to change the world, priesthood. And for Maggie, it was the same, like it's Mother Teresa, and to learn that in family life has been honestly like a continued sort of part of our heart that God is navigating in. But definitely, it's almost like one of those things you look back and you say, boy, was that my will and my mess? Was that God's will and sort of the struggle that he invites us into? In some ways, it probably doesn't matter, right? Like it's almost hard to say in different times, but I know no matter what, God can do more in our life, even with our sin, than if we hadn't sinned, right? St. Therese talks about this idea of like his mercy is so great that he can use all these circumstances and situations. Yes. And certainly I look back and I can't imagine it having gone any other way.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we did. We needed, in some ways, like that, the time apart did force us to, I think, let go of our own wills in a lot of ways, to surrender to God, like these deepest parts of our heart, and actually have to be like, all right, I'm all in, Lord. Like, and I think we both had that period of like, it's all right, it's just you and me, Jesus. So what does this mean? And then I think really we're much more able to receive like that gift of being back together, like with whole hearts, instead of like kind of wrestling with like, we're too different, or like we have these like opposite poles, and instead just to have confident, like, all right, God fashioned each of our hearts in pretty unique ways, but he must have a plan that they actually all work together, so.
We actually had a bunch of friends even who were, and family members who were like, are you guys sure about each other? Because you're both kind of like rocket ships, and don't you think like two of you, like.
It's kind of combustible, don't you think?
Awesome. Danger.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, but you were both being formed, and you were both being freed up to enter into marriage. And also, it sounds like even in the early days, you were still on some level, or maybe we all in some ways maybe continued to struggle with, well, what does this look like? How does this work within the context of family? Because there are many people who are like, well, I love Jesus, I want to serve him, but is the mission field only out in Zimbabwe, or what, and it's like, what does that look like? And you have tried to really blend this story together, right? And from the very early days, it sounds like both of you had that humble heart, that was ready and eager to both be formed, but to serve.
So then, what happened in the early days of your marriage? How did that look in your mission? Because I know that you continued to discern mission.
Yeah, I mean, I think in the early days, in many ways, like our careers had a significant place of like where we felt we were living that out. Tim was a theology teacher at Father Gabriel Richard in Ann Arbor, and I was working in an ICU as a nurse. So we both really felt like in those 40 hours, there was a lot that we were being asked to
for sure
to live like very missionally in, very much so. So I think like that in many ways, like those first couple years, that's how we incorporated it. And then some of the challenge came in actually after having our first. Eva, and having, for myself, I had a bit of like an identity crisis of like, I don't know how to live these parts of my heart out, because I pulled back majorly from work, 14-hour days and nights and weekends. It was not working well with a newborn. So I pulled back in a big way. And so we've had like different seasons, I feel like, for what it's looked like for us to live missionally. And for those next stretch of years, in a big way, with Tim being the primary provider for the home, I was like, all right, I think with him being in ministry, I think, we overlap those things. There's a lot of different ways that God calls us out in mission, but with Tim specifically working in ministry, that has kind of been a pretty prominent part of it. So we transitioned, I think, to it being like, all right, this looks like Tim and his work. But then in more recent years, I think we've gone through like the conversations and growth of realizing like, oh no, like this can't just be like what Dad does for work. This is still a big part of my heart. So there's going to be ways that I am specifically called to live it out. But then our whole family, actually, that's probably been like, I think what the experience with the Eucharistic Congress and revival taught us was, oh, God's actually inviting this whole family into something, and we don't have to be so like, keep it at arm's length with Dad's job, or it kind of like, parcel it off to certain aspects of our life. So it's been a journey with as we continue to grow as a couple and as a family to look like to understand what that looks like to live missionally. Yeah.
Maggie, could I jump back for one quick second? As you became a mom, you were really in kind of missionary work in nursing and out there, and it sounds like you pulled back from your work. Was that a hard transition?
Yes,
moving from maybe an area of competency and that you had been trained for into mothering, and is that what does that look then, and what does it look like today?
Yeah, that's very much so was a hard transition for me, which in and of itself was a hard thing for me to admit. But I'm an adrenaline junkie. I like being a part of a team. Like I felt like if I'm in like a crisis situation in a hospital, I am like calm. I know what to do. You gave me that first crying baby, and I was like, I have no idea what I'm doing.
Maggie has saved like multiple lives in the back of churches at different points. Like,
and I'm like, let me in. This is what I do. So it was like it was a hard transition for me, and it did hit at identity parts of needing to really make that transition from even understanding myself and my worth from like what I'm able to do or provide to the world, which obviously mothering and raising a family is a major thing that you're providing to the world, but in that quieter sense. And for a long time, I kind of incorrectly interpreted it as that was like a phase. I need to let go of that like mission drive. And instead, I've just come to see like it's just seasons. There's just seasons in life. And those young children, and sometimes it might be a very long season, but especially in those young years, to become much more focused at home, it was a difficult transition, and it just kind of looked like, as far as like in those years, like me kind of being like, I don't even know what to do or how to like think of myself for some time, you know?
Sure.
I'm not a homebody, so to be like home with tiny bodies, I was just like, this is not the
There's
most
too much
natural
bodies going on
thing.
here.
Yeah, exactly. There's so many tiny bodies.
Yes.
So
well, one of the things I always think about is that time for women of having children and that hidden work in the home is really such a time of powerful formation. You know, like so my mission in life, or in my heart, I've always wanted to be a teacher. And so I was a teacher before I had kids, and I was a teacher during, when I, and throughout our
in smaller part-time.
in like very side hustles, teaching. But now, and through our work with the Messy Family Project, I'm very much a teacher. But I look at when I was in the classroom before I had kids and after I had kids, and it's just, I have received so much formation for the gifts that God wants me to exercise in this world through my motherhood, I would not be as good of a teacher if I didn't have kids, 100%, like hands down. Like, so that time, it's like, I think sometimes Catholic moms, we can think, and I'm not saying you're saying this, but just kind of like building off of what you're saying, and I'm sure this has been your experience, is that sometimes Catholic moms can think, here's my professional life, but now I'm going to leave professional life and I'm going to go have kids, and then I'm going to go back to professional life and it'll be like the same way as before. And it's like, no, you don't understand. You are formed. You are going to become even better, like more amazing to do what God is calling you to do through the crucible of motherhood.
That's right.
Yeah,
that's so well said.
I think it's too. It's it kind of goes along even with the Mike, your initial question of. I think one of the reasons we like some of our definitions of mission in certain years, like I think especially when we were young, part of that for me at least was for sure like the sense of adventure and desire for adventure in life. And I think like even mission fields can be boring at times, right? Like even Zambia, certain days were boring,
long
right?
Stretches,
and I think you kind of have to learn to like find some of the supernatural and the mundane, no matter what calling you have in life, in order to really like get the real fruit from it. And that I think for sure was a transition for us of, not defining, certainly like, so John Paul talks about this idea, right? Like your families become who you are. And he combines us with this idea of like St. Augustine, St. John Chrysostom talked about like, your families are a domestic church by nature of how they're like composed around these sacraments of baptism and marriage, but they're also then like there's a becoming in that of like churches inherently bear fruit and they go on mission. And so I think you're right of like not stratifying those two things of like ministry as a career is what it looks like to live mission in the, an additional temptation there, but to actually fold it into our family life and invite our kids on that with us. I think there's a temptation sometimes in Catholic circles to define, I need to go start an apostolate if I want to live mission. Like every family is called to bear fruit outward, but that is like often very boring. Like our days are very ordinary in the midst of that.
And it's true, the grass isn't always greener, right? Because sometimes you just look out and you're like, oh, that's the adventure or the whatever, of going out and serving. But there are boring in the mission, if you will, external mission fields, and there's boring days within the internal, mission field of the home.
You know what, Tim, I wanted to ask you in light of what Maggie just shared, which I think a lot of our listeners could relate to. How did you support her during that time? And and also when you talk, maybe you could like move the microphone towards your mouth. You could just move it back and forth then when you're talking. Because believe it or not, I can hear Maggie a little bit better than I can hear you.
Oh, funny, because I'm coming at the side maybe, as I turned it. Yeah,
probably. Yeah. But if you could just touch on real quick how you supported her during that time. And then I wanted to also ask you about how mission looks like now for your family and how that happened during the Eucharistic Congress. But I'm so curious your perspective on that time in her life, which was so difficult.
Yeah, I think honestly, to answer that question perfectly honestly, when I look back at that time in our life and in our marriage, I actually see a lot of like failure, in that way. I think you're doing your best. You're like, you've been married a couple of years. You've never been a dad before, still not a very good husband. I'm still not a very good husband. But
She's working on you.
You do your best and you're both figuring out so much together, and you're both figuring out like on a ministry salary, how do I provide? And, as we downshift.
Because you're in it for the money, I know. So that's really
cool. When you're making the big bucks, you're like, honey, stay home. You're good. I got you. Yeah, especially a theology teacher, and so I think there was a lot of like wrestling in those years of like finding, it was just like a constant balancing act of trying to find the right sort of like time for each other, time for parenting, time for jobs. What's the right like mix of ingredients? And I don't know if we ever got it perfect, but we were at least like fighting for it. If nothing else, I look back at those years and I see people who are trying. And so it's like, it kind of covers up a multitude of sins. You'd love to have some of those back. I don't know if you ever feel that way. Like you look at certain seasons and you're like, oh man, I would do so much better at that today. But I do think there was a, more and more, there's been a recognition of like, the Lord is calling Maggie to be a great saint, and he's put like incredible gifts on her heart and in her life. Like I always tell people, like my wife is more missional than I am, and she's a better leader than I am. And she told me not to say that. But it's like
disobedient husband.
Yeah. It's just like, she's just like a remarkable. And so as you learn to kind of admire your wife in all of her like sort of callings in life, I do think there's a real like responsibility then to find ways to hold space for those callings to be expressed. And I've gotten better at that over time. But certainly with the Congress, it was like a tidal wave in some ways that took over our family's life for 3 years. I was gone 12 to 15 nights a month and working from home because we didn't have offices or anything. And it was this real experience of suffering, of like our kids were invited to suffer in a really powerful way, and we were invited to suffer in a really unique way. And I think a lot of that ultimately helped bear fruit in the mission, but it was a wrestling to say, I feel like we've done something now as a family that is beyond our capacity. And you question of like, did we push too hard for our, like, is this too much for our kids? Is this too much for us? Like, it was just, the scale of the project and the timeline and everything was just way more than we anticipated. And so it ended up being, in retrospect, probably the most impactful thing personally we've ever done. But definitely like a feeling of being called out on the water a bit.
And our kids too. So even as Tim started with the organization, it really was, like you said, like a tidal wave of, it was a lot to dive into. And I feel like we could share some of those stories of even that first summer.
Yeah. So we got a ton of like spiritual attack. Yeah. So there was I'll tell the story. So there was an executive team meeting for the revival that we had. On the last day of the revival, this guy shares, like, hey, I sometimes get these prophetic words. And last night I woke up at 3 a.m. and I was terrified. And I've never had such a strong sort of prophetic sense in my life. And everyone kind of around the room goes quiet. They're like, well, what was it? What was the sense? And he said, I had a sense that this initiative was about to come under tremendous spiritual attack. And I was terrified at the thought of the weight of it. And they said, well, what else? And I was facilitating the session. So I'm standing in the middle of the room. They said, well, what else? And he turns and points straight at me. And he said, it's all coming for Tim and his family.
Oh my word. Oh my gosh.
So that's how we started.
Okay.
Welcome.
I go back to my table. I go back to the table where where I was supposed to be sitting, and I see a string of texts from Maggie where she's like, the basement's flooded. I'm down here. And, like,
seriously?
Are you kidding me?
No. Dead serious. The exact same time,
Yeah. And so soon after that, at this point, we are a little bit operating under this, like, okay, Tim's been called into this. I'll kind of hold down the fort at home while he takes on this project, which is increasingly becoming like a bigger thing than we realized stepping into it. Tim always had a very clear sense, like, God is inviting the church into something significant in this moment. So that really was like the drive from the start there. But within weeks of him taking this job, we really felt immediately like the actual spiritual weight of the project. Like, oh wow, this is a big deal. And he wasn't lying when he said there's going to be a lot of attack that comes with it. But in a very fluke accident, a couple weeks into taking this project, our then 4-year-old son broke his femur.
Oh, and then, word.
Which is one of the more traumatic accidents a child can have.
Yes.
He was in a spica cast, which is basically a hip to, past his knees cast. So he's like, just held in this position for 8 weeks. And a week after that, our other 2 kids were taking a shower, and out of nowhere, for no apparent reason, there was a glass door that closed the shower. It just exploded while they were in there. So our daughter Eva, miraculously, like we hear the shatter, we hear them screaming and run down, and there's a ring around her, and none of the glass has touched her. And she actually had been holding Charlie, our third at that time, and so he had actually been protected as well. But then he tried to get out, and he slipped in the glass, so he was just covered in blood. So we're pulling him out of the shower. We call 911 because we can't even tell like how injured he is.
Yeah.
And so they show up, and there's like a kid in a wheelchair in a cast, and there's, the third is coming.
Like, what is happening?
They're like, what is happening?
We need to report something here.
Yeah, exactly.
Seriously, the cop comes. So the paramedics come, and then 10 minutes later, the cop comes, and I'm like, okay, here we go. And so he said, sir, can I see? We heard, broken glass and an accident, and a kid bleeding. Can I see where it went? And so I take him down to the basement. I'm showing him everything, and he's like, what happened here? And I start telling him the story, and I finished the story, and I said, are you a man of faith? And he said, yeah, I am. And I said, I just started this kind of new big job a little bit ago, and it's been a wild ride. And he was like, gotcha, just you guys stay safe. And so, yeah, we got multiple, we got rear-ended on the highway.
We got right after that.
We got hit going 60 on Federal here in town. Like, it was just like this unrelenting series of like calamities for 2.5 years.
I will say that what really helped, so it was after that second accident with Charlie, and we were very shaking up, kind of almost being like, all right, God, we didn't know our kids were going to be in this. Like we
for sure.
Like, okay, we can do this. It's going to be busy. And all of a sudden it's, this is a cost on all of us. And
did that flip a switch in your mind?
It did. The first switch was panic. Like, we can't do this. This is,
of course.
I can't leverage the kids, and it definitely pushed me as a mom to a new level of like surrender and trust in God the Father. Like, these are His children first. And a belief too that God actually invited them into something as well. And we've seen that in them, even at young ages. You read the stories, the lives of the saints, and often they're very young children. Whether it's the circumstances of their life or the way that God moves in their hearts, it starts at very young ages. But it was soon after that a friend, I think it was Pete Burek, who asked, like, all right, who's praying and fasting for this thing?
That was it. Yeah. So we had already done, I'd gotten like every like lay deliverance book I could get my hands on. And, we enthroned the house to the Sacred Heart, and we brought a priest over, and we started a Marian consecration. But then Pete was like, who's praying and fasting for you? And so we called up a couple friends, and they started an intercessory team for the Eucharistic Revival, who basically did it throughout then, and led monthly prayer sessions to all these people. And we're very particularly holding our family up, also the whole initiative, which was cool. And they prayed and fasted all the way through the Congress and everything. But it really, like, there was a lessening of the weight after that intercession came in.
Which it really speaks to the power of intentional prayer and fasting, because I remember their first night of meeting and experiencing like a lift of heart. It was like someone else is like carrying this with us.
Right.
And it was beautiful with our kids. Theo, he was the one who broke his leg, and in many ways he's a very intuitive child. Very, he's just highly emotional and in a very like positive way. And I think in many ways like suffered the most through the seasons, just kind of his age and his closeness to Tim, and just that impact of having Dad gone so much. And it was after the Congress that a friend asked him, like, what did you think? And they were there, and were very impacted by the event, as well as the Eucharistic pilgrimage came through our home, so they were able to participate in this really profound way. And he said, it was a really, really hard few years, but I know now that it was all worth it. It was just he was 6 at the time saying this, and just beautiful to see, like, he got it. Like, we suffered, God invited us into this, but like, I saw it, and I know it was worth it,
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
That's huge. Because again, you might describe it differently, but it's like kind of, you had your own missions, when you were, before you were married, you joined up, maybe in the beginning as parallel on mission, but then slowly forming a unity. But then it sounds like this was a big move where it actually became a unit, where you all then became a family unit. Because I know when we started this ministry, I remember we sat down all our kids and said, look, we're starting into something, and we're pretty confident there will be attacks. And we want you, and because we had married kids at the time, right? And just like, we want your marriages to be strong. We want our relationships to be strong, and we need our prayer to be strong. And
because you all are going to have a target on your back, and just to know that even when our kids are going through the teenage years and all of that, like, you're really sending them into battle through like adolescence, I feel like, in this day and age. And just to let them know, it's just like, guys, like, this is no joke.
And when our car blew up, that was a good sign.
Yes,
that
right.
There was
after we started, seriously, after we started the ministry, probably a couple months after, our car caught on fire, like, for no reason. Our car, like, literally caught on fire. Mike was in the car with all of the kids, had to get them all out. It's burning. And when I pulled up, because I wasn't with them, I saw my sister. I said, "Where's Mike?" And she looked at, and she just pointed to the parking lot where the car was burning up. And she looked at me and she goes, "Messy family project. Messy family project." And she's like, she knew it, like, intuitively. Right then, she's just like, hey, Satan wants to distract you, discourage you. Okay.
But it is, pun intended, it kind of lit a fire under us to realize that we were in. Come on, I'm a dad. I got to throw it in there, right? But it so really did. Respect, Mike.
Yeah. I see you.
But it does. It changes our perspective, and it helps, I think, too, even our kids see that, even though it's not good. Like, it's not something we'd wish upon them.
Of course, we never want our children to suffer.
And we want to protect them and keep that. But the reality is that your kids are being impacted, and there are some negative things that come with all of this, right? Just me being gone, or Tim, you being gone and doing that work, or what have you. There is a natural challenge, but there is both a natural benefit and a spiritual fruit that, when done properly, because I felt like there were times when I had a career that we both kind of discerned, yes, this is a time for me to be on mission out there. But it was that 2-year time where it really stretched us very thin in our marriage and our family. And there was a natural, even though it was the right thing.
It was a grace for the moment. That's why I describe it to other people.
That,
right?
Right?
It was there was grace for that time.
but it was, at least for us, at least in this other job that I had, right? It was for a season, it was for a time, and then I could take a breath, and then the family could kind of come back together. But in that, I think you have a unique experience in that you all saw that together. And it wasn't just that you were keeping the home fires burning, right? That the two of you really saw this as something together, which is pretty unique and powerful.
Yeah, that is powerful. That's something you were doing as a family.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Maggie was reading Redemptoris Missio the other day, just casually.
Every time.
just a light reading,
just to brag on my wife a bit. Yeah. So, she found this quote from John Paul, and they're talking about it's the Holy Spirit who impels us and sends us on mission, and grace is provided for the calling, and that it sustains us. And I think that was an experience we had of even now in gratitude, looking back to say,
you could never do it right now.
Even there's almost like how did that even, how did we make it through that? There was grace, and I think I'm pretty convinced prayer and honest conversations with our kids, talking about things directly, can cover a multitude of sins, and kind of like you had, just inviting them into reflection on the experiences they're having. So the night before I left for the Congress, I went into the kids' room as they're going to bed, and I said, hey, this is the last night I'll be staying under this house, under this roof, working for the National Eucharistic Congress. And I expected them to kind of go, yay, and instead they just started sobbing, the three oldest, sobbing. And they come in, they jump out of bed, and they're hugging me. And our oldest two were just kept saying, this has been so hard. And so we just sat down, and it was one of those moments of a little bit of dad inspiration, where I just kind of looked at them and I said, next week, you're going to watch miracles happen. You're going to see people physically healed. You're going to see lives changed. And you're going to watch the church renewed in the church in the United States. And I want you to look out when that happens. And when you see that happening in that stadium, I want you to say, Jesus asked me to do a hard thing, and because I said yes to him, these things are happening. And then it was cool. We got to the Congress, and one of the priest volunteers, basically knelt down and said the exact same thing to them without knowing I'd shared this. He was like, thank you for what you've done. This is going to be remarkable. And so even teaching them the nature of, I think we want to protect our kids from suffering sometimes. Yes. And instead teaching them to suffer well is sometimes it's the calling. Yeah. We never want it. We never wish it, but we can help them interpret it when they go through it and become saints. Yeah.
Because either way, if it's a busy work season or, whatever dynamics are at play in your lives as the parents, they will be impacted by it. And so we can either choose to try and keep it at arm's length as much as possible, but they'll still get the ripple effects, or invite them into a conversation about it. And we almost were forced into the latter. You are in a wheelchair, so we are going to talk about this. This is a big thing that God has invited our family into, and you are a part of it. And I think it's just changed the way that we talk about mission in general in the home, and just to even have respect for their hearts and souls and what God is inviting them to, certainly within our family unit, but to see he does have a story for them and an adventure for each of them. And to start giving them the language and even understanding seasons of suffering and joy. This has been a real season of restoration for our family. And they recognize that, they're able to really appreciate that. Whereas I think in other seasons, earlier in life, where we were still, Tim and I both living missionally, trying to do things within the church, et cetera, but we weren't inviting them into it in the same way. So it almost seemed
exactly
they're navigating the waters with us, but they don't have the language or they weren't being formed in it with us. So we've learned since it's much better to give them a place at the table in the conversation,
I don't think I've ever heard a family express it in the way that you're expressing this right now, about inviting your children into mission, and also kind of really believing that the grace of God is active in their lives. Amen. We had an interview with a woman who does Catechesis of the Good Shepherd, and one of the things that she said, do we believe in the grace of baptism or don't we? Because if we believe in the grace of baptism, that means that a young child can be experiencing and be walking in the grace of God at that moment and experience him in a very, very powerful way. And sometimes we don't invite our children because we think they don't understand or for whatever reason, but it really, that comment and then what you're saying right now, that's just really, really beautiful, I think. Yeah.
So let me ask you this question. Do you think families are meant to be on mission, or is it only for a special couple of people, one or two people out there? Is it just for...
How do you explain that?
Yeah, just for a few. Just for the Hernans. Yeah.
Everybody else is off the hook. Is that what you're saying?
That's what I thought you were going to say. That was the plan.
Yeah, I think it goes back to that domestic church definition for me. Like I love, someone said, I think it's Father Mallon or someone I heard it from, but I'm sure, like the church doesn't so much have a mission. The church is a mission. And if that's true of the church, it has to be true of the domestic church as well. There's two twin calls, universal calls to every baptized Catholic, the calls to holiness and the calls to mission. And so we have those individually in our lives, but also I do believe in this, particular age that we live in, this kind of post-Christian era, that families have a unique place to play in being a witness to the world of like the life to the full, but also actually in like going out on mission together, like that it is us, like we are the mission. I think the temptation we see in like good Catholic circles at times is like, we are the mission, like each other is the mission. And like, for sure, if you don't have communion in your family, you can't have mission. But like, I think it's also worth wrestling with, if it's in a small way or a big way, like how is God calling our family to bear fruit ad extra as well? And I'm fairly convinced that like God will make that clear, like in the circumstances of our life and in prayer and discernment, if we sort of open up to that with generosity and surrender to that. So,
That's all right.
So those of you who aren't on video, their video camera, I think, just fell down.
I think it was our mic just attacked us.
I said it.
There you got that there.
Sorry, everyone.
That's all right.
Yeah, if all want to see what happened, you have to go to YouTube
awesome.
and watch
it. We're going to do that as part of the little short we're going to create there. The blooper reel.
No, but that one wasn't a spiritual attack. That was just
that was normal human.
Go ahead, Maggie.
Maggie,
she was about to say something.
Yeah, I think that was what Tim said was encapsulates it well. Just that it is by nature of being a family of a family of baptized persons. We are the domestic church, and that means there is supposed to be a missional aspect to it. JP2 does a beautiful job of laying out the three, outside of like the universal call to holiness, the three ways that that Catholics are primarily called into mission are either pastoral care of the faithful, which we do naturally in our homes, right? The new evangelization to bring the gospel to historically Christian areas that have grown lax and lukewarm in their faith. And then ad gentes mission, like to the nations, to actually bring the gospel to those who either have never heard the gospel of Jesus or it's so distant that it's not a part of their worldview at all. So especially in the raising young kids phase, I think most of us are going to be focused on the pastoral care of the faithful.
The faithful being our kids in our home.
Our kids, yeah, exactly, and our community, our extended family, et cetera. And there is that, as a father, like there's that pastoral care that you bring in that position in the domestic church and that we participate in as parents. But that to have an awareness of all three calls and even a conversation in the family is something that I do think is important. And maybe in particular, as Tim said, like in this moment of like post-Christian society that we're living in an apostolic age. What John Paul says in Redemptoris Missio is it's ad gentes, the mission to the nations, is the one of those three that is actually essential to like the heartbeat of the church. And the other two follow naturally.
Yes.
But so most of us aren't going to be called to go long-term mission to Zambia or Zimbabwe or whatever. But our nation is increasingly growing in that direction of having more and more people who the gospel is far from their hearts, something that they have never heard of. Tim mentioned the nursing school I went to, and I got really tight with a girl there from the Pacific Northwest, and she was great. We just got along great because we were basically like same person, like exact same temperament, interests, but she had borderline no interaction with Christianity. Like she had gone to a church for a funeral once, had seen, popular images in like a Hallmark movie, but was like, not against it, but was kind of like, what is this,
unchurched.
you know, and what is extraordinarily unchurched. And it was one of those moments of, you know, kind of sharing my own faith and experience of God that I became very convicted of, like, oh my gosh, like this is why we need to know how to live missionally, is like, Erin is going to be, and her experience is going to be something that we increasingly encounter in this world.
That's right. That's right.
And we need to be, I think we need to equip our kids for that. Like their experience will be different than ours. You know, I still feel like when I think of my childhood, it's like the 90s. It's like Homeward Bound and everybody's Christian. And it's like, I don't know, like that's still like the world I grew up in. And it's not going to be the same for them. And we don't need to be afraid of that. Right. But it is like the church does operate differently in an apostolic era. And so I do feel that pressing responsibility as families to prepare our kids for that. So in that conversation of inviting them to mission is knowing they're going to navigate a different world than we did.
Yeah. And knowing that as parents, I think kind of puts an urgency on us getting our marriage and our home life to be thriving, because the world needs us. You know, we really, one of the things we talk about a lot is that the Catholic family has what the whole world is looking for. And if we fail to make that alive and present and incarnate in our homes, then our kids won't be able to bring that out there. They will know who God the Father is because of you all, right? They'll have a deep, intimate relationship, particularly when they're younger, with who God is based upon their relationship with you. And that sets them up to be at a whole new level of engaging with the world, right? But that doesn't mean we wait until they're out and gone to be on mission, right? And I love that you know, when your kids your kids are still obviously they're always going to be our kids, but while they're under a roof, that's our formative time with them. And when we can present them with and bring them into encounters not only with our Lord, for them to know him, but then also to bring him or be a part of a mission that brings him through corporal or spiritual works of, you know, that we could be on mission together. Plant seeds deep in their hearts. And so I want to maybe just transition.
Well, let me just say this one thing, because when you were talking about those three aspects that John Paul brought up of mission, the first thing I thought of was my children's friends. And that is where we have seen those three different aspects, because see, they have close friends, right? Who have families that share our values. And this is like, as they are like, you know, 6th grade, 7th grade, junior high, high school, right? They have close friends, people share our values, people who are like really their brothers, you know, like their sisters. But then they also have friends, and they all go to Catholic school. But as most of us realize, you know, not everybody goes to Catholic school, is Catholic, or practices the faith. So then they have other people who I feel like are that new evangelization, you know, like who have an experience of faith, of course, because they're at a Catholic school, but they don't really practice. And for us as parents to not be afraid, and to help our kids to not be afraid of engaging those children, I feel like that mission mindedness is the answer. That's the answer to not being afraid. It's like to help our children to recognize, no, you are supposed to be loving this person, bringing them in, because they have not had the experience that you've had. And our children have even come in contact with the, like, that ad gentes, you know, to the nations, of kids who have no experience of faith at all. We had a child, one of our daughters went to public school, or even just other people that they meet in, some of our children have done some missionary work themselves, even locally, you know, with different groups. But it's amazing to them to come in contact with people whose lives are like, it blows their minds. But it's so good, because if they have that mission mindedness, if we've told them, yes, those are people out there who really, they don't have the family you have. They don't have they don't know the Lord like you do. Love them. Let's engage those people. Let's bring them in. And I feel like that is something that parents, it's a great discernment for parents, because I know that there is a concern about the darkness of our world and our culture, you know, and you want to form and protect your kids. But like Mike was saying, I think that's why our formation in the home is so important, because those other kids that your children come in contact with, they need Jesus. They need your children to love them. and balancing that out of like helping your children be strong enough and not being influencers, not being influenced by. So anyway, we are running to the end of our time, but we want to talk about the family mission experience.
Yeah, because I think this is a great setup, though, because in this context of family, it's in the context of our mission as Catholics, as baptized Catholics who are now entered into the sacrament of marriage, which I believe is a missional sacrament that is about service. It's about bearing fruit in the world. And a kind of just, let's talk about how could somebody implement a kind of a family mission, like bringing that missional formation into the heart of your family and an experience of what you all are, I think you're on the board for and this whole experience of the family mission experience.
Yeah, I'd love to share a little bit about that. So the SOLT family mission experience, it flows out of the SOLT Community Society of Our Lady of the Trinity. Are you familiar?
Yes. Why don't you
but you can explain it for our listeners.
Even giving them some of the people who might be, some of the speakers that they may be familiar with that are SALT.
I think I accidentally just turned it off.
Yeah, I'll turn it back on.
So they are a missional community that's comprised of priests, religious, and lay families. So it's kind of a unique setup, just kind of woven into the community. And I think that it's about 80 years old, so it's a newer order. A lot of people, like Sister Miriam, is like, if you want to be like, have you heard of SOLT? Have you heard of Sister Miriam? Then they're like, oh, okay, that's right.
Yes,
right. I get it.
Exactly. So very much at the heart of that community is a real love of families and a real belief that families are called to live missionally. It's a Marian Trinitarian spirituality that they live out, and they see the family, mom, dad, and kids as being a beautiful, obviously, image of that. Yeah, exactly. And about a year and a half ago, a new organization formed in tandem and kind of flowing out of that spirituality with SOLT called the SOLT Family Mission Experience. And initially, the thought there had been to provide lay families that are within that community opportunities to immerse themselves in the mission field. SOLT's present in 8 different mission territories, countries. And soon after the creation, the realization came there's a lot of families who aren't in SOLT that actually are also seeking this kind of opportunity. Completely separate from the creation of the SOLT Family Mission Experience, that mission drive I'd mentioned myself kind of always having from the start, I convinced Tim to kind of DIY our way through a mission trip.
Yes, so what happens is we live in Littleton, real Colorado. Story. We live in Littleton, Colorado, where everyone is sort of middle class and similar like types of life and stuff. So a day of deep satisfaction on Maggie's part started her just researching frantically for like people we could do missions with, partly out of a sense of like Maggie just has a real love and heart for the poor and for the global church, and I think there was a real desire to like. Sort of invite our kids again into sort of that breadth of experience and seeing some of that. And so it DIY is probably the best word for it. You just kind of like called some priests, was like, hey, Tim will do parish missions if you let us come minister with your community.
His skills. I know this guy.
You are being voluntold.
Yeah.
So I had to go do parish missions at these like 2 parishes. One was on San Pedro Island near Belize, and one was at Divine Mercy. And we were down there for probably 10 days. And it was my first experience of like sort of a, the mission fields in that way. And it was unbelievable. Probably one of the best things we've ever done as a family, like just the community and the welcome. And Father Scott, who's the pastor at Divine Mercy in Belize City, just this like incredibly like just gone from fasting, and like he played hockey at Notre Dame. He's like this incredible, brilliant guy that like is basically running the country of Belize at this point. And it was, I don't know, I guess I couldn't almost say enough about like just what a powerful experience it was. So Maggie had kind of taken us on this trip.
With the idea, I was like, hey, we have little kids, so if we can do it, we can show like this is possible. In part from my experience doing a variety of different missions through Franciscan University and then separate, I had encountered families who had felt called to live this way. So I knew it was possible. I'd seen it done. And I thought, if we can bring, a 2-year-old, then that's kind of like, proof right there that this is possible. And in part, Belize stood out because of the proximity even to Colorado. There's some practical points which a family does need to consider. And I was very compelled at the idea of working with a religious order because there's so much to be said for just mission organizations in general, but the kind of the long enduring nature of the relationship of a religious order in a mission community, it really protects that from any kind of accidental harm happening by Americans coming in with maybe different ideals or et cetera, or trying to fix problems that aren't really fixable. And when you have long-term religious in an area, they just have really come to know the people. They understand the community so well. And SOLT just stood out because of the family aspect of like what's written into the community. So we brought the family, and this is something I'd kind of been wrestling with coming back. Like, where do I even start? Like, I got some folks from a high school here to come down to kind of scope it out for their school as well, and slowly making progress. And Father Scott then called me up, I guess it was last fall, to say, I really want you to meet Deacon Ken Dawson. He's a part of the SOLT community, and he's felt really called. He's left his career in tech, and he and his wife have bought a property down here to house families on mission, and he just wants to full-time find ways to help families engage in the SOLT spirituality and mission communities. So that is he's been doing it full-time for a year and a half now. There's mission sites in Belize, in Cologne, Mexico, one coming in North Dakota, and God willing, eventually in all 8 countries that SOLT is present in. Don't ask me what all the countries are, because I can't remember. Philippines, Papua New Guinea, Australia. I can't remember all of them, though.
So if somebody what you're saying is that the family mission experience has a relationship with SALT.
Yes.
And so you serve in places where SALT is present, though the religious order, it's not like family mission experiences under the religious order. You just kind of operate with each other.
It's very you couldn't have SOLT FME without SOLT. It's its own 501c3, but very much flows from the spirituality of the order. There's formation before, during, and after. Really with that lens of a Marian Trinitarian way of life on mission. That's what they breathe. And so it's almost like your hope is you bring the families on the mission trips, and on that last day you commission them to go live missionally. Now it's like you've come to kind of for this very in the flesh experience of living and breathing mission from in every moment of your day. Very much so focused on living Eucharist to Eucharist. There's a big emphasis on daily mass, and they do something called liturgy prep, which is where you you go over through the readings for the next day together. You say night prayer together, and you reflect on, how is God using the Word to inspire me and to feed me as I'm living mission. So it's
kind of like instead of going on vacation, a family could take a week and go on mission.
And a big emphasis, something that's unique with a family mission experience, is how adaptable and affordable it is. It's and again, having part of the DIY for us was looking through and being like, oh my gosh, this would be so cost prohibitive for us to go serve with our kids for a week that we simply can't. That's not possible. Sure. And what I had learned, when I went to Zambia, it was emailing with these sisters, and they were like, yeah, we're here. If you want to buy a plane ticket, you can come help. It's there's no, they're just kind of there. So I knew there's more openness, and so we really minimize costs. As of right now, the working model is families are responsible for their airfare. And then we ask for a minimum donation of $250 for the whole family for the week, and that's lodging, that's your transportation, and that's your dinner every night. So I don't really know where you could go for a week for that price, So it's really with that eye of, it's not to make, it's clearly not for the purpose of making much money. It's really for the sake of helping families have a very immersive experience of mission, so that they learn how to kind of embrace that as a family unit, and then go and bring that home. And God willing, it changes the way they live as a family and their communities.
There's something really beautiful about that. Like I've taken, for a number of years, I would take some of the kids and we'd go and serve with Mother Teresa's community, soup kitchen and stuff like that. But it wasn't for like
a week
and it
like
was in the U.S.,
hours,
right? And but then we've also because we really firmly believe that mission is it is about service and all of that, but it is so formative. And I've always found, or we've always believed, that it teaches our kids that there's an injustice, an evil, or a poverty in this world that they don't know in their daily experience, and that they are called to do something, and that they can do something, that they are capable and free and able to give of themselves. And it is something that sometimes people will look out and see their teenagers and be like, I don't know if my selfish teenager would do this. You put them in that environment where their hearts are drawn in a way that is just beautiful and powerful, and it leaves them changed. And so we've always said
we can not realize how capable they are of self-sacrifice.
That's right. And they themselves may not be,
Sure.
And, but so we've always said to our kids that before you get married, you need to be on mission somewhere, and some of them have done it over summer. Some of them have done a whole year of mission somewhere, but it leaves a mark on your kids. And I think as parents, we need to look and say, we're not in charge of everything in their lives, but I believe the formation of their hearts while they're under our roofs is one of our chief objectives. And what are those experiences? What are those encounters? What are those moments where we can orchestrate something, that we can be their, as a good friend of mine would say, be their spiritual philanthropists to really fund their experience. But I don't think I've ever thought about, I guess I've thought about it, but doing that all together, like that's beautiful.
Yeah, I think that is really powerful.
And the fact that you're making it affordable, that it's actually cheaper than a vacation.
Yeah.
Yeah, and direct flights to Belize City. It's easier to get there than you'd think. I think that's really well said. And it brings me back to your earlier point of even like this idea of how we form the communion of the family in the home. Like I do think that breathing in and out of mission, like those experiences with Mother Teresa and the sisters. We used to serve with the Mission of Our Lady of the Angels on the west side of Chicago when we were living there with the, and I do think it does everything you say. Like it's almost like Pope Francis talks about, right? Like the church kind of needing to breathe out a little bit in order to let the air out, and I think that it can be true of a family as well too. And I agree. Like we want to do, there's the key conversations, right? Or it's like education, where are they going to go to school? Yeah. What camps are we going to send them to? Annunciation Heights here in the mountains, or, Steubenville conferences, like the things that are going to put together the package of chances for them to encounter Jesus and make a decision to follow him. But I think it's really well said of what's unique about a mission experience is that especially young men, I think about my sons and I think about how many young men today don't know how desperately the world needs them and needs what they have to offer.
So true.
And there is something about that rising to the occasion that does teach us, I love how you put it, I am free, I'm capable, like the injustices of the world and the pain and longing and suffering that are in human hearts, or at least how you put it of you can feel defensive when you don't know almost what to do with it. But when you feel like there's a part of a mandate on your life to be part of the balm there's something very empowering and life-giving.
Yeah. All right. So where would people go to find out a little bit more about the family mission experience? Can anybody sign up, or is it, I don't know how that works.
Honestly, that's a great question. If you go to soltfme.org, so that's SOLTFME.org, all the information's there. There's really no age cap. It's not like you have to be, this old, or you can't be this old to come. And you can fill out an application, or even if you just shoot us an email, we'll get back to you. We try to have a conversation with families pretty quickly, just to get a sense for, who are you and who are the kids and what would you be hoping for, and hope, God willing, invite them to either Belize or Mexico in the near future. We do have, especially the second half of the year, we still have more space available. And it really is just a beautiful community to interact with. We've been very blessed to, I guess, we're have Salt in our lives to interact with the global church in that way, like Tim was saying, is the one other point I wanted to make there is it's really powerful to see the church in the mission field like that, and to get to go and see it outside of like the American context. Like there are differences in every culture in a beautiful way, but then there's the similarities to come together to celebrate Mass with the Mexico community or the Belize community. It's just a powerful experience. So go to the website, shoot us an email, and we get back to you quickly. It really is like open to anyone, and we know sometimes too it can be hard for a whole family to come. We love to have whole families come, but maybe it's a dad and son trip, or mom and dad and the older kids, and they leave the little ones with the grandparents. It kind of depends on everyone's specific situation. So we also would never want to say like that's prohibitive if you can't bring the whole family. But certainly there is something powerful like that experience of, that, let's say it's that teenage kid learning like what he is capable of, and then getting to talk to his dad about it that night because he was with his father serving in that way. And there's a big emphasis on encountering the persons. There are works that are done certainly and help provided, but it's a highly relational experience of mission, because that's going to be how we're called to go live mission at home. Is sometimes we will be called to help build the thing or bring food and clothes to the people in need. But it's a lot of relational time and encountering other persons, encountering Christ, your own family members in the community, and then a really beautiful encounter with the poor. That's more about actually meeting the person than solving any big problem.
Sure.
Yeah,
and kids
beautiful.
are a lot of one of the questions we get a lot is like, what would like a young kid do? But there's something so just really powerful about having kids in the mix because of the way they break down barriers. Like what might feel like a naturally like awkward, like I don't even know how to have a conversation in this moment, and then the kids are just playing together because they're just kids together. Like when we were on San Pedro, like I was talking to a couple women there, and we're literally like in like a dump was where like they had a corrugated tin shack, and our kids are just like all of a sudden playing hide and seek with their kids because they don't have the same like social like hesitations, or I've never been in this situation before. Kids are always in situations they've never been in before, so they're happy to just play, and it does really like break barriers in a beautiful way. And then for the younger children too, I just think it's a lot of them observing and taking in, but they don't forget. Like our kids have really retained, even when they were at young ages, what they experienced there. So reach out to us. We'd love to get back to anyone who's interested, and welcome you on any missions with us.
Well, that's so beautiful. This has been a great conversation.
I
And I
know.
feel like there are like 4 or 5 more questions I want to ask, but I'm going to have to save
But
it
we
for
gotta
a
wrap it up.
future.
Yeah.
But the whole idea, so I'm gonna leave it in your hands for any final comments, and then maybe Tim, you could just close us out with a prayer for our families. But really, this whole idea of being on mission. When we got married, we entered into a status like Bonhoeffer talks about, or I'm sorry. It is Bonhoeffer. Yeah, Dietrich Bonhoeffer talks about that when we entered into marriage, we entered into an office of service to humanity in the world, and that your marriage is not for yourself. And so I feel like that we have lost that sense in the church today, that this isn't just about our love, it's about how we can bear fruit in this world. And that fruit begins in the home, and it's supposed to flow out from the home to the world. And I just love your story, and it's unique to you, but it's got so many universal themes and lessons, I think, for all of us to unpack. And then I just love the invitation. Families, think about how you can be on mission, because missions unite families. They form all of us, and they give us a sense of where is our calling? What are we to do? And God loves us too much to give us things that we can do on our own. And he wants us to go out there to help and be a part of the greater body of Christ. And so thank you for the conversation and the encouragement there. And I'll leave you with any final thoughts, and maybe you could just close us out with a prayer there.
Just pray.
Yeah, prayer.
Yeah. No, we just appreciate it. We're so grateful to be with you both, and really enjoyed the time and the conversation too. I feel like I have a lot to think about as well too. So just so grateful to you and your ministry. So let's all pray together. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Jesus, we thank you for the gift of marriage. We ask for the grace of this sacrament, which forms and founds families, to be stirred up again in each of our hearts. May it be a gift of self-gift and of service and of sacrifice, of healing. And Lord, may all of this bring us and everyone else whose hearts are made for you to greater union with you. Mother Mary, we consecrate all of our intentions, our children, our families, to your immaculate heart and to your intercession. And in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Father, Son.
Thank you both so much.
Yes.
Tim and Maggie, thank you for joining us. This was a awesome conversation. And again, if you want to find out more about them, saltfme.org, and we'll include that in the show notes.
Wasn't that amazing? So there was so much in that podcast, but I just want to highlight a few key takeaways that really struck me. Maybe there was different things that struck you as our listeners as you heard what they had to say. But first of all, the first thing that struck me was that we all need to expand our understanding of being a missionary.
Yeah.
It's more than just serving the poor overseas. We really need to bring the light of Christ from our family, because people are wanting family. People want family.
Yes, they long for it.
They are longing for it. And so we need to understand that this is the great work that we have to do as families. And kind of this is related to that how we're on mission changes based on our seasons of life, right? You're always called to give yourself to others. First, of course, to your spouse and to your children. But how we reach out to others is going to look different depending on that stage that your family life is in. But don't just think that just because you're in the survival zone, you're going to be there forever.
Right.
You won't be. Maybe this is just a season, and then you'll be able to reach out to others. And I guess this is kind of all related. These all build on another. Is allow God to push you beyond your capacity. I really appreciated that so much, because it's like you always say, God loves us too much to ask us to do things we can do on our own. Yeah. Because He wants us to rely on Him. He wants us to rely on community. So, and when things are difficult, and even when you see your children have a hard time, you can teach your children how to suffer well if you're doing that as a family. And
God invites your whole family into mission. Yeah. And even if you're asked to do hard things, they are His children first, right? And I do think about the times that mission has helped form so much of us, Alicia and I as a married couple, but also our kids. And families don't, this is the final kind of takeaway that we have, families don't just have a mission, they are a mission, right? Teaching our children mission-mindedness is a way to combat the influence of the world. We could not encourage you enough to think about how are we using missions to help form our children, whether that's in the U.S., whether it's in your local community, or whether it's going with the SALT missionaries, right?
Yeah.
There's something powerful about the mark that the character that is built and the mark that is left upon your children when they are able to go on mission. What if all of you as a family were on mission together and you saw that as part of your overall perspective as parents? This is part of our job, forming our kids into evangelizing missionaries.
Okay, so 2 questions you and your spouse may want to ask each other. First of all, before you had children, did you have a sense of mission? Maybe you didn't, and that's fine, but just it's a good thing to ask yourself. But how did you feel called to serve, and how can you continue to do that with your children? It's kind of like we talk in the family board meeting about your values. Sometimes it's helpful to look at what attracted us to each other, what was present before we had, we got distracted by our kids, but this is true exactly of mission as well. How did you feel called to serve, and how can you continue to do that?
Well, it might look differently, but right.
And then the second question, in what ways can we teach our children to suffer well? Have you asked your kids to do hard things for God? Have you asked that of them? I think that is an excellent thing to think about, and think about how does that look like? What does that look like in your family?
All right. Well, we hope you enjoyed today's conversation and both are edified, but maybe given some new ideas as you look at the new year, look forward at the formation of your kids. And until next time, may the Lord bless you and keep you.